Okay, so today we're diving right into something I think a lot of people can relate to, uh, work rules,
Yeah.
and specifically, where you get to do your job from.
Yeah,
We've all been through a lot in the last few years with all that stuff.
absolutely.
But you brought an interesting YouTube video to the table. It's from the Ring of Fire, and it's about federal workers and some policies that were put in place.
Yeah, this one is kind of juicy.
Yeah.
Um, the video is called "Federal Workers Blast Trump for Working from Home After They're Forbidden from Doing So," and well, it's pretty much what it says on the tin.
Okay, so what's the background here? Like, what's the situation that this video is focused on?
All right, so the video looks at a time when a former administration put in some rules about where federal employees could work.
Hmm.
Basically, they were told they couldn't work from home anymore and had to come back to the office.
Oh, wow. A full-on back to the office order.
Yeah, pretty much. And the video then compares that to, what the former president himself was up to at the same time.
Oh, okay. So like how the rules applied or didn't apply to different people.
Exactly.
Interesting.
We're going to unpack all that and try to see the situation from, the point of view of the folks who are actually affected by this whole thing.
Yeah, that's important to keep in mind, right? Like real people dealing with these policies.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. The video mentions an executive order supposedly signed when Donald Trump got back to the White House.
Right.
What did that order actually say for federal workers?
So from what I gathered from the transcript of the video, this executive order was super straightforward.
Okay.
It basically said no more working from home for federal employees, everyone back to the office immediately.
Wow. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Nope. Sounded pretty final.
So what was the reasoning behind that? Like why the sudden switch back to everyone being in the office all the time?
Well, according to the video on February 11th, Trump said that he thought federal employees working remotely weren't actually working. Yeah. He's quoted as saying they were probably out just playing tennis or golf and that nobody's going to work from home.
So like basically assuming that people were just slacking off.
Pretty much. And the video makes a point of saying that this claim, wasn't backed up by any actual evidence.
That's interesting. So a big policy change based on what sounds like, maybe a bit of a hunch.
It does seem that way from the video's perspective.
Okay, so this order comes down and suddenly a bunch of federal workers have to go back to the office.
Right.
Did the video talk about how that actually went down? Like, was it a smooth transition?
Not so much.
Yeah.
From what the video describes, it was actually pretty chaotic.
Really?
Like a lot of logistical issues. Apparently, something like 48% of federal workers were working remotely at the time.
Wow, it's almost half.
Exactly. So you've got this huge chunk of the workforce suddenly told to go back to their offices. But when they get there, things aren't exactly ready for them.
What do you mean?
The video claims that in some places, desks have been taken out, computers were missing, there weren't even enough chairs for everyone.
No way. Seriously, no desk.
That's what the video says. It's kind of wild.
Like, what are people supposed to work on the floor?
Right. It's like a bad office sitcom, but it was real life for these people.
I remember hearing about something even crazier.
Oh, yeah.
Something about office buildings being sold.
Oh, yeah. That can't be right.
It's true. The video claims that in some extreme cases, the government had actually sold the buildings where these employees were supposed to be working.
Ooh, they're being told to go back to offices that literally don't exist anymore.
Exactly. And on top of all that, the video says that anyone who didn't follow this order could be fired.
Wow. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a fun situation at all.
No kidding. Now, the video also talked about productivity and morale among federal workers.
Yeah.
Like, what was the vibe at the time? What did the video say? Well, the interesting thing is the video actually cites studies from back then that showed working from home was actually leading to higher productivity among federal employees.
Really? So it was actually working?
It seems so, and not just that, their quality of life was better too, according to these studies.
So it's like the opposite of what was being assumed.
Yeah, it really makes you question the reasoning behind the whole back to the office push.
Yeah, it makes you think, okay, so we have this order supposedly to get people back in the office because they're not working, but actually they're being more productive at home. And on top of that, the policy seems to clash with how the former president himself was working.
That's the big issue that the video highlights. It's this whole contrast between what federal employees were being told to do and how Donald Trump himself was operating.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What does the video say about his work habits?
The video claims that he spent a lot of time working remotely, even though he was the one pushing for everyone else to be in the office.
And I remember the video specifically pointed out all the time he spent at his resorts.
Yeah. Right. They said he was at his own properties for 6 out of his first 7 weekends as president.
6 out of 7. Wow.
Yeah, 5 at Mar-a-Lago and 1 in Doral, Miami.
And the point is that even though he was at these places, he was still doing presidential stuff, right?
Exactly. The video makes it clear that he wasn't just on vacation. He was signing executive orders, making announcements, dealing with trade issues, even ordering military actions.
So basically working remotely, just like the people he was telling to come back to the office.
Yeah, that's the irony that the video is getting at.
It's a pretty stark comparison.
Yeah.
The video also includes some direct quotes from federal workers about this situation.
It does.
What were some of the reactions that stood out to you?
There's this one quote that I think sums up a lot of the sentiment. It says, "It's clear and should be to the rest of Americans that it's never about the rule. It's about who's making the rules."
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. It really speaks to the feeling of a double standard.
Absolutely. And it highlights the sense that these policies weren't really about what was best for the work or even for the workers, but more about who had the power to make the rules.
Right, like rules for thee, but not for me.
Exactly. And there's another quote that's even more intense. This worker says the mandate was never about effectiveness, collaboration, or cohesion. It was always about federal employees being traumatically affected.
Traumatically affected. That's a really strong choice of words.
It is, and I think it shows how deeply this policy impacted people. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt like a deliberate attack on their well-being, according to the video.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot of anger and hurt.
Definitely. The video also shares some more personal stories from workers, people talking about their own experiences.
Yeah, I remember one where someone was worried about their workload.
Yeah, this person said they were working 50 to 60 hours a week and wondered who was going to do all that work if people were forced to quit because of these policies.
That's a valid concern, right? Like these are essential services we're talking about.
Absolutely. And there was another example that really stood out to me. A worker mentioned a supervisor who lived in Florida and had been hired as a remote employee.
Okay.
And they pointed out that this person couldn't just up and move to be closer to an office.
Right. They were hired based on being able to work remotely.
Exactly. So it's a clear illustration of how these policies could have really unfair consequences for people who are just doing their jobs.
Yeah, it's like these decisions were being made without any thought for the real people they were affecting.
That's the impression you get from the video.
And the video also brought up this whole thing about golfing.
Ah, yes. The golfing.
It was interesting how they tied that in, both to the reason given for ending remote work and to the former president's own activities.
Right. So on the one hand, you have Trump saying he doesn't want federal employees working from home because he thinks they'll be out playing golf.
Like that's the big concern.
Apparently. And then on the other hand, you have the video pointing out that he himself was quite the avid golfer.
I think they even gave some numbers about how much golf he played early on in his presidency.
Yeah, they claimed he played 15 times within his first 2 months in office.
Wow, that's a lot of golf.
And they didn't stop there. They also allege that these golfing trips cost taxpayers over $2 million.
So the video is basically saying, look, you're worried about federal employees playing golf, but you're doing the same thing, and it's costing taxpayers money.
It's a pretty pointed critique, for sure. And the host of the video even chimes in with their own take on the whole golfing situation.
What do they say?
They kind of jokingly suggest that maybe it would have been a good thing if being on the golf course kept the former president from doing other things like signing controversial orders or taking military action.
Or like if golf was actually preventing something bad from happening.
Exactly. But
Okay.
of course, they quickly point out that that wasn't the case. Those things were still happening regardless of the golf outings.
So the overall tone is pretty skeptical and critical. Wow. Okay. So we've really dug into this video. We've looked at the claims about the executive order, the stated reasons for it, the reported consequences for federal workers, the information on productivity, the contrast with how the former president was working, and the reactions from the workers themselves.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, it's a pretty complex situation, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it raises some important questions.
So if you're listening to this, what are some of the key takeaways? What should people be thinking about after hearing all this?
I think the big thing is this idea of leadership and the example that's being set. When there are different rules for those at the top compared to everyone else, it can really erode trust and morale.
Especially in the public sector, right? Where people are supposed to be serving the public good.
Exactly. And this whole situation also makes you think about remote work and how effective it can be. Were the decisions being made based on actual evidence, or were there other agendas at play?
Right, like whose interests were really being served.
It's something to consider. And I think there's a bigger question here, too, about the reasons behind policies in general. One of the federal workers in the video said, it's never about the rule, it's about who's making the rules.
That really stuck with me.
Me too. And it makes you wonder, how often is that true? Are the reasons we're given for rules and regulations always the real reasons? Or is it more about power dynamics and who benefits from the way things are set up?
That's a really thought-provoking question, and one that I think applies to a lot more than just workplace rules.
Definitely. It's something we can all think about in our own lives and experiences.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for diving into this with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for the deep dive.